Hi, I'm Chris from Airwindows, and hey, you can do this. And this. Because this is Airwindows CrunchCoat. So what, you might ask, is going on here? Well, this is a variation of ClearCoat. Remember how I've been doing variations on ClearCoat? The original ClearCoat is a bunch of different reverb sounds that are all very sort of basic and direct, and they're little small room sounds. Then I did CloudCoat, which is exactly the same thing except for they're all pass filters, so they're kind of a blur effect. Well, this is doing something else entirely, because CrunchCoat is taking my undersampling technique into a new place. So all of these plugins were already doing undersampling. Undersampling is what I call it when I'm doing my reverb, but if I'm running at 96K or 192K or whatever, typically for me it's going to be 96. I am not going to run the reverb algorithm at supersonic rates because almost the definition of reverb is sound traveling through a lot of air over and over again as it continues to reflect, and all the high frequencies will go away. So if you're retaining the high frequencies in a big reverb, that's already the wrong answer. So I've been designing my stuff to use undersampling, and the maximum highs you can get is only what you get on the raw input signal. And I can play this again. And you can hear that this is basically a lot like ClearCoat. It's not exactly the same, but it's using the same routines, and we can do a little tiny room or a much bigger room. ClearCoat gives you a little bit of regen, but this gives you full control over the regen. Because I thought that would be useful to include as we turn this into a morphable reverb beast of complete uncontrollableness. But here's the thing. You might have a reverb that is doing this kind of thing, and if you were doing the undersampling, it would be taking the 96K or 192K and running it at double rate. But what is that algorithm doing? Well, I'll show you. The noise you're hearing is the noise of a basically, like 800 hertz sample rate or something like that. And this is using the same algorithm I used for ClearCoat and CloudCoat for the undersampling, which is it kind of connects the dots. It draws a straight line between each point, and that's what I've been doing with all of my reverbs. But the interesting thing about it is what happens when you start using it at different sample rates. And you get into a sort of bizarre, well, I'll put it on full regen. You get into a kind of bizarre situation where you can get this extremely retro digital sound going on. And that's because the way the undersampling works, it's giving you, this is not bit crushing. It's essentially frequency crushing. And what you get out of that end result I'll pick a slightly different sound for this. Is the ability to slow down the reverb sound, meaning little tiny reverbs can become much bigger. So we'll try this. This is such a tiny reverb that it sounds like a closet. See, sounds like a closet. But then when you take the D-res and you drop the sample rate down, the sound of the room gets bigger and bigger as it goes. But you'll notice another interesting thing that's happening, which is you're also getting effectively a weird old school brick wall filter because you're literally not taking in any new samples above a certain rate. So what it's going to do is obliterate the cymbals and things and leave only your snares and stuff. And now it is a closet that has been reduced so much in pitch that it's like a giant cavernous space. And yet it's still based on that closet sound. So what we can also do is take a sound that's a little bit more like a room and a little bit less like a closet. Or do some other kind of noise. This noise. And you can hear that it sounds like a box. And then use D-res on this. And you wind up with this sort of old school retro digital sound going on. And you can tune in more or less of things like the hats by changing the D-res, changing the sample rate to where we have a very primitive, very old school sounding thing. And now we've got it as an infinite sustain because it's based on a householder matrix, which is something that you can set up to just continue forever. This could also be used as like ambient music or whatever, but the sound it's producing, you hear a certain amount of crunch, but it's sort of low passed, but it's not really low passed because it's just drawing straight lines between each of the sample points as it goes. So you still get a little bit of stuff going on in the highs, and that's part of what gets you the retro digital kind of sound, which is why it's called CrunchCoat. There's a crunch to it. And so you can get a real vintage sort of digital vibe out of this. And if you're trying for a D-res that is just high enough that it sounds a little bit like a real thing, but you don't have enough of a room size, that's when you choose one of the larger rooms. And there you go. So CrunchCoat is a free plugin. It is one of my, it's going to go into consolidated. I have chosen to restrict it to 4 controls. If I can use less than 10 controls, I get to put stuff into Airwindows consolidated, which is from the Surge synthesizer people, and is a really nice addition to my stuff. And this too is a really nice addition to stuff because you can use it and abuse it in a lot of different ways that weren't available for things like ClearCoat and CloudCoat, because those are trying a little too hard to be realistic. And this is such a breakthrough that I'm going to start using it for my other reverbs. Not just ones of this basic design, like CloudCoat, ClearCoat. Those are a very basic design for a reverb sound. It's not meant to be sculpted in any particular way. It's meant to be sort of primitive, sort of old school. And this got me to a new level of old school, but this same sort of thing would work perfectly well with stuff like my attempts to do Bricasti style stuff. For instance, I'm still not on a perfect K cathedral. I've done 2 of them. I'm going to be working on a 3rd, but it's going to include all of these things. It's going to include the regen, which will let you dial in infinite sustain if you so choose. It'll still do the treble falling off stuff, optimized to act like as close as I could get to the Bricasti Cathedral. And I'm probably going to make it a little more sophisticated with regard to comb filters versus all passes. This is technical stuff, but it's also going to have that D-res, because I'll tell you what, both of the previous K cathedrals had D-res already, kind of. It's just preset, and it's not letting you turn it down as far as this one will. And this one will let you turn it down very, very far indeed. It'll let you take the regen out completely. And as you can hear, since it is a overall sample rate control on the reverb algorithm, this also lets you do weird, creepy pitch things. And that's just always fun. So no problem there. My hope is that you can make some use of this, and I'm going to keep working. I get to keep working on this stuff because I have a Patreon, and people are willing to pay me to do this. So if you feel this was worth, say if you would have bought this plugin at $50 a pop, considering the things that it's doing, well, you don't have to. I'll just give it to you. But then there are people who are going to my Patreon and setting up to pay, say, I don't know, $50 a year. If you figure I give you 2 plugins that you would have bought at $50 a pop to keep forever and also have access to the source code and infinite updates and all that kind of stuff for no extra charge, then you could jump on the Patreon for 2 $50 plugins a year and so on. It's kind of set up around that. And I really appreciate it when people do, because that's why I'm still here doing this. I didn't have this plugin. I didn't have this technique for the, dare I say, abusing the undersampling last year or even last month. It's because I get to still do this that the new things keep coming out. And I'm really excited about some of the stuff that I'm working on. One of the things I've been working on really hard is my metering stuff. That's beginning to get to a point where people can start using trial versions of it. I'm going to say show up to my live streams if you want to hear more about that. I'm not going to tell you directly where to get trial versions of the metering plugin right now. But what I will tell you is I wanted to hear what that would sound like on non-butt rock style music, because it's not just about, oh, things were better when everything was just only rock and roll. Although I have also found that one thing that registers incredibly high on this hit record meter is Chuck Berry's Johnny Be Good, the original record off of one of the old records, off of an old Chuck Berry's greatest hits. Lights up the meter like crazy, sounds completely different from 70s rock or 80s rock. And you know what else lights up the meter real interestingly? And some of my fans will be quite familiar with this act. Are you familiar with UK dubstep at all? Not Skrillex. Burial makes my meter go right off the charts, but not with high frequencies and not with a balanced sound, but with bass, consistently. So I have a good feeling about that work that I'm doing. But hey, what we've got for today is Airwindows CrunchCoat. And this is coming out as individual plugins. It's VST and audio unit. It's VST2 for those things. But there is also Airwindows Consolidated, which comes out as clap. And it comes out as VST3 because it's GPL, so it can. And so on and so forth. And it also has all the little Airwindowpedia notes about what the plugins are and what they're doing. I just hope you like it. I'm going to get back to work, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.